Hey everybody, we're going to talk about chapter 3.6 here, the relationships within the relational database. Now we've talked about some of these relationships before back in chapter 2, so a lot of this is going to be review, but we're going to look at what changes here when we get to this logical view of our data. So we've heard of the one-to-many relationship, we've heard of the many-to-many relationship, and we've heard of the one-to-one relationship. So again, a one-to-many relationship says you will have for one instance of this table here, so I'll say sales here, this is my sales table, I will relate to many, so one, again, I'm partial to the UML notation, you might like the crow's foot notation, the Chen notation, it's no big deal, I just like the UML here. So we'll say one salesperson relates to many, so their relation here is they sells to, that's probably right, doesn't sound like good English, but that's okay, sells to many customers. So to have a one-to-many relationship, I'm not going to put anything in the sales table. There's no field here that's going to show have a foreign key to customer. Because, again, I'm going to have many customers. There's not room to put many customer IDs in a single field. It's not going to work. So what we have on the many side, we add that foreign key here, which is our sales ID. We'll say, okay, what salesperson do you relate to? Right, so salesperson number 27 maybe. And again, if this is a foreign key, we're going to have referential integrity and make sure there is a salesperson with ID 27 in this table. And that's how we have that one-to-many relationship. Okay, a many-to-many relationship. And again, this again is fine conceptually, but we're going to look at a problem here. So if I say, again, we have customers and products. Many customers, right, will buy many products. You want your customers to buy lots of products, right? And you want many products to be bought by many customers. Okay, that's great. But now when it comes to implementing this, we can't put a list of products in the customer table, and we can't put a list of customers in the products table. There's not a way to do that to have our foreign key. So what we need to do is we're going to add this thing called a joining table, right? Or a bridge table. I like the word joining table here. And the idea is we're going to change that relationship. So now I will have one customer has many orders. This will be an order table. And the order table will have my customer ID and it will have the product ID. And one product will have many orders. So we take a single many-to-many relationship and we turn it into a join on another table. We add the joining table and we have one-to-many and one-to-many. So we're still keeping the many-to-many relationship, but now I can actually implement it in a database because here I can say, hey, customer number 3 ordered product number 7. I wrote 2, I said 3. So customer number 2 bought product number 7. Customer 2 also bought product number 9. Customer 3 also bought product number 9. Right, so we can see many customers can order many products, and many products can be bought by many customers. And the other really cool thing here is we can store additional information that we need, like, hey, what was the date of the order? Right? How did they pay for the order? Or like, is it paid for yet? Right? However, we want to store that kind of information here. So we're able to add those additional attributes that we need to know about that relationship. So again, this is the joining table. Now it's going to take a little bit of practice here, but anytime you see a many-to-many relationship, conceptually it's fine. When it comes to the logical view of it, we need to solve that many-to-many relationship with a joining table. And we'll turn one many-to-many relationship into two one-to-many relationships with our little joining table. All right, and then the last one you'll see is like a one-to-one relationship. Now, one-to-one relationships get a little bit interesting. So maybe you'll say, hey, a manager manages one department, or one department is managed by one manager. So where are we going to put that attribute? Right? Where are we going to say where's the foreign key? We could, if we had a manager table, add a department code to say, hey, they manage this department, or the department table, maybe we could have the manager number or the employee number, right, of who is the manager. Either one's okay. Not a big deal here. Now, what you are probably going to have, though, is you're probably not going to have a manager table. You probably have an employee table. So again, a lot of times, like how we're storing our data is going to dictate this piece of information here. So if we have an employee table, right? And they have, their name, and they have their ID, they have the department they work for, right? So an employee can work for a department, and a department can have many employees, right? So one department has many employees, but one employee works for one department. Again, maybe you get shared among departments, but that's another issue here. You're probably assigned to one department. So the table that would have that one-to-one relationship needs to be the department table to have the manager ID here. Now, again, we don't want to deal with those synonyms, so I wouldn't call this the manager ID if it really is an employee ID. Right? Maybe you might say manager employee ID, and that's fine. Sure, not a big deal here, but again, and we're not going to call it ID because the department will have its ID already, but it's the table here. So like employee ID, or employee number, whatever our primary key is here is that relationship. So that's a one-to-one. And we get, that's another common relationship as well. But those are relatively easy to implement. We just need to be, understand where that relationship goes. So you probably don't want to put it in the employee table, like manages department ID, because most employees aren't going to manage departments, but every department will have a manager. And so that's a way that we're going to look at that relationship to know where that piece of data should go. All right, so again, we've looked at some of these before. Some other terms for that joining table, it might be a composite entity or a bridge entity or an associative entity, has all sorts of terms here. And then one of the fun things with the many-to-many relationship is what is your primary key? So you might use a composite key of, hey, customer ID and product ID is my key. Now, the problem with that, though, is if that customer ever wants to order that product again, how? We can't do that. We're not going to have a unique entry. So you need to be careful with that. So again, I think system-generated IDs are great. Maybe you include the date, and that's perfectly fine, or the date and time, right? Because if they order, 10 of these widgets and they realize, I really needed 20 of them, and they call you to order 10 more, if it's the same day, we're going to cause all sorts of trouble. Or maybe that's a date time and that's okay. But why not just add an ID field? I think primary keys that are just a single ID are wonderful. I'm a big fan of that. So I would say just make a new ID field. But again, it's not required. You might have a composite primary key of that attribute here. So just up to you when we do that designing process. All right, that's it for relationships.